When I told my only son I was thinking of moving into his neighborhood, just to be closer, he laughed in my face. "Don't embarrass me, Dad. This isn't your tax bracket." I smiled, nodded, and walked away without a word. A week later, I bought the entire street under a shell company and raised his rent. You want to talk about pride? Let's talk about the price of forgetting who paved the road you walk on. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me thank you for your continuous support. If you love stories like this one, support us by subscribing to this channel and comment where you are watching us from. It will be great to hear from you. Now let's jump into the details of what happened. There's a quiet kind of ache that sneaks into your bones when your child looks at you like you're no longer relevant. Not angry, not disappointed, just mildly embarrassed by your existence. That was the look Jordan gave me the last time we had lunch. The same Jordan I used to carry on my shoulders at the park, the one who used to beg me to stay a little longer before bedtime. Now he sat across from me at a polished wood table in a trendy downtown bistro, scrolling through his phone between sips of overpriced green juice. I had always prided myself on being a grounded man. I wasn't rich by his standards, but I had done all right. Retired early after 27 years working commercial plumbing, a few smart real estate flips, and a lifetime of saying no to things I wanted so I could say yes to things he needed. My late wife, Marianne, used to joke that I could turn a nickel into a quarter with sheer stubbornness. God, I missed her. She would have known what to say when Jordan acted like this. She had a softness that wrapped around our son's heart like a blanket. Me? I was all calluses and concrete. But I tried. I was thinking of moving a little closer, I said casually, stirring my coffee. Maybe even into that new development up by Halston Ridge. Just to be near you. Jordan's eyebrows shot up. He didn't laugh right away. He scoffed, like the idea was so absurd he didn't even need to form words. Then, with the kind of smirk that felt like a slap, he said it. "Dad, don't embarrass me. That neighborhood's not really your tax bracket." Just like that. He said it without malice, like it was a fact. Like telling me the sky was blue or the bill was due. He didn't even look up from his phone. I nodded slowly, swallowed the pride that tried to rise up like bile in my throat, and smiled. "Fair enough," I said. But it wasn't fair. Not even close. What Jordan didn't know, what he never cared to ask, was that I could afford Halston Ridge 10 times over. Hell, I could buy half the street and still have enough left to live out my days comfortably. I just never saw the need to flaunt it. My wealth was quiet, deliberate, tucked away in property deeds and safe investments. I drove a 10-year-old truck, wore boots until the soles flapped, and still did my own oil changes. Not because I had to, because that's who I was. But that moment, that offhand dismissal, it stuck. Long after the check was paid and we hugged goodbye like nothing had happened, it lingered, like a splinter in my chest. I went home to my modest ranch-style house and stared at the same kitchen table where I used to help him with his homework. The house was too quiet now. No laughter, no footsteps, just the hum of the refrigerator and my own breathing. I pulled out an old photo album, one of the real ones, thick and worn with pages that stuck together in summer heat. There was Jordan at 6, wearing a Halloween costume I hand-stitched after Marianne got sick. There he was at 12, holding the trophy from a baseball tournament I coached even though I didn't know a damn thing about baseball. Every memory was a reminder of how far apart we'd grown. That night, I sat in my garage with a cold beer and my old friend's silence. I didn't feel angry. Not yet. It was something heavier. A mix of grief and something close to humiliation. I'd sacrificed my youth, my marriage, my health for that boy. And now I was a joke to him. I could have let it go. Could have chalked it up to him being young and ambitious, living in a world where appearances mattered more than principles. But something in me snapped. Not in a dramatic, movie-style way. Quietly. A decision more than an explosion. The next morning, I called Alan Miller, my attorney of 20 years. "You still got that shell company registered?" I asked. He chuckled. "Yeah, but last time we used that was for the duplex in Charlotte. You looking to invest again?" I leaned back in my chair, eyeing the steam curling off my coffee. "No, I'm looking to make a statement." By the end of that week, I was sitting in a leather chair across from a private broker who specialized in off-market deals. Halston Ridge was shiny, new, and just gentrified enough that most of the houses were owned by corporate entities or out-of-state landlords. That made it easier, cleaner. I'm looking to buy quietly, I told the broker. Through a holding company. No signs, no drama. He raised an eyebrow. You want one house? No, I said. I want the whole damn street. That got his attention. I had to liquidate 2 properties and pull from a few bonds. But within 7 days, I held the deeds, or at least long-term management rights, to 12 out of the 14 homes on Jordan's block. Most were rentals. A few were vacation homes. No one suspected a thing. I didn't move in. Not yet. I wanted the timing to be right. I had the lease agreements adjusted subtly, standard market adjustments, nothing that would raise flags. Jordan's rent was bumped by $600. Not enough to break him, but enough to sting. Enough to make him ask questions. I watched from a distance as tenants grumbled on local Facebook groups and Nextdoor threads. New landlord raised rent again. Anyone know who this BlackRock Equity Holdings is? I smiled at the name I'd chosen. Something cold, impersonal, Wall Street sounding. It was perfect. 2 weeks later, I drove past the neighborhood just after dusk. Jordan's car was in the driveway, lights on in the living room. I parked down the street and just sat there, looking at the life he'd built. It was beautiful, I'll give him that. Stone veneer, uplighting, manicured lawn. But it wasn't built on his sweat. It was built on mine. As I turned the ignition and pulled away, I didn't feel satisfaction. Not yet. But I did feel something close to peace. The first move had been made. And my son, my arrogant, blind, brilliant son, had no idea what was coming. If there's one thing I learned in real estate, it's that people rarely pay attention to what they don't think concerns them. You can buy the rug right out from under a man's feet as long as you do it quietly and with a smile. That's exactly how I approached Halston Ridge. I started visiting the street regularly under the guise of a private inspector. Clipboard in hand, button-down shirt, khakis I hadn't worn since Marianne's funeral. Nobody batted an eye. I was just another vendor, another contractor, another background face in a neighborhood where wealth liked to pretend it ran on invisible gears. The first property I acquired was on the corner, a 3-bedroom rental owned by a divorced couple who wanted to offload the place before their tax deadline. The broker handled it cleanly. My shell company wired the funds, and suddenly, I held the reins. From there, it was like dominoes. 2 more homes were owned by absentee landlords on the East Coast. They didn't care who bought it, just that the offer cleared above appraisal. I made sure it did. Then came the duplex, one side leased to a young couple, the other empty. I walked the unit myself one morning and stood in the empty living room, imagining Jordan's face when he realized the landlord he'd never bothered to meet was the same man he called an embarrassment. That thought kept me warm at night. In 2 months, I controlled the rental rights or full ownership of nearly the entire street. 12 properties total, out of the 14 on Jordan's block. 1 was still in probate, and the last was owned by a retired dentist who lived on-site and had no interest in selling. I let that be. I wasn't trying to take over the world. Just my son's little corner of it. Jordan still didn't have a clue. He called me a few times, brief check-ins, nothing deep. He'd ask if I was still in the same old house, or if I needed anything. I lied smoothly. Said I was keeping busy with some small investments and weekend projects. He offered to have me over for brunch. I declined. You sure? He asked. Leah's making that sourdough you like. I'm sure, I said. Don't want to embarrass anyone. He paused. The silence was thick. He remembered. Dad, I didn't mean. You meant it enough to say it. Look, I was just. Jordan, I cut in. Don't worry. I don't hold grudges. And I didn't. Not really. I held memories. And those were far more dangerous. One Wednesday morning, I parked on the street early. The sky was the kind of washed-out blue that comes just before summer bleeds into fall. I sat in the truck with my coffee and watched landscapers tidy up the curbs. Across the road, Jordan emerged from his house, Bluetooth in one ear, keys in hand, suit jacket draped over his arm like he was in a commercial for overpriced watches. He didn't see me. He never looked past his own driveway. That afternoon, I visited Unit 11, the one directly across from Jordan's house. It was empty. I'd had the old tenants move out with a polite buyout offer. I told them the owner was looking to upgrade the property. That wasn't a lie. I stepped inside and stood at the large front window that faced Jordan's pristine lawn. "This'll do," I muttered. Over the next 2 weeks, I gutted the interior. Not because I needed to, but because I could. Hardwood floors, new appliances, luxury countertops. Every choice was deliberate. Not flashy, familiar. My taste. My space. My rules. The moment I signed the final renovation receipt, I had the property registered under my legal name. Just one. Just enough to be seen. The others stayed tucked under the shell company's umbrella. I wasn't interested in being obvious, just undeniable. Then I sent out the new lease agreements. Jordan's notice went out on the 1st of the month. A friendly, corporate-toned letter. "Dear tenant, please be advised of an upcoming adjustment to your monthly rental rate, effective 60 days from receipt of this notice. The new rate will reflect current market values in accordance with state rental guidelines. For questions, please contact our property management office. An increase of $600. Not illegal, not unreasonable, but significant enough to make him stop and look at the signature on the bottom of the document. Sincerely, Management Team, BlackRock Equity Holdings, LLC." He texted me that night. "Jordan, you hear about this? Our rent just jumped by $600. Me. "That's so? That neighborhood gets expensive fast." "Jordan, you think it's legal?" Me. "If it's in line with comps, probably." Jordan, "Still. Feels shady. They bought half the street. Nobody knows who BlackRock is." Me. "Interesting name, though." Jordan, "What?" Me. "Just sounds familiar." I left it there. Let him stew in it. The next day, I ran into one of Jordan's neighbors, Elliot, a retired Navy man who rented the home 2 doors down. He was sitting on his porch, reading a Tom Clancy novel and drinking what smelled like strong coffee. "You the new guy fixing up Unit 11? He asked. I nodded. "That's me." He grinned. "About time someone put some life in that place. You moving in?" I glanced over at Jordan's house. Thinking about it. Elliot leaned back. "You seem familiar." I shrugged. Maybe I just got that kind of face. We talked for a while, mostly about sports, the heat, the housing market. He mentioned the rent hikes and how people were on edge. "Some think it's one of those Wall Street types," he said. "Others think it's a real estate shark trying to drive up value." I chuckled. Maybe it's just someone who got tired of being overlooked. That weekend, I mowed the front lawn of Unit 11 myself. No crew, no contractor, just me, my hat, and a push mower. It was hot, and my knees ached, but damn if it didn't feel good to work a piece of land with my own hands again. Jordan saw me. He was backing out of his driveway when he stopped, rolled down the window, and stared. "Dad." I looked up, wiped my brow. "Hey, son. What are you doing here?" "Just tending to my place." "This is your place?" "One of them." His jaw tightened. He pulled over, parked, and got out. "You own this house?" I nodded slowly. "And the others?" I didn't answer. "Dad, what the hell is going on?" I let the silence hang, then finally said, "Just a small investment. Thought I'd be closer to family." He blinked. "Your BlackRock equity?" I smiled. "Funny how names work, huh?" He stared at me like he didn't know who I was. Like the man mowing a lawn across from his upscale home was a stranger. "You raised my rent. I adjusted it to market value." "This is insane." "No," I said softly. "What's insane is forgetting where you came from." "Who you came from?" Jordan didn't reply. He just stood there, breathing hard, before turning around and walking back to his house without another word. When the first rent notices hit the mailboxes, the neighborhood reacted like you'd expect people with money to react. Loud, confused, but ultimately passive. Nobody wants to make a scene in a gated community. They'd rather whisper behind trimmed hedges than shout across a lawn. But as the weeks passed and lease renewals rolled in, the temperature began to rise. I kept my distance at first, watched it unfold from the porch of Unit 11, drink in hand, hat shading my face like a man who had nothing but time. I'd see the frowns, the clipped conversations by mailboxes, the way folks stood too long outside Jordan's house, whispering. He wasn't the center of it yet, but his home, his name, and his reputation were starting to stick to the wrong kind of attention. And still, he said nothing to me. Not after our last talk. Not a text. Not a call. But I knew my son. He didn't like to lose control, not even a little. It started with a post on the neighborhood Facebook group, written by a woman named Cassandra, who lived 2 doors down from him. Rent just shot up again. No explanation. No negotiation. Who owns our street now? Anyone else dealing with this? By the end of the day, there were 27 comments. Most of them angry. A few confused. Jordan didn't post, but I saw his girlfriend, Leah, hit the like button on a couple. Subtle. The next day, a group of residents organized a casual meetup at the local community center. It was half book club, half protest. Jordan showed up wearing business casual and a tense smile, like he was there to troubleshoot someone else's disaster. He was always good at playing diplomat. Got that from Marianne. I walked in 10 minutes late and took a seat in the back. Nobody noticed me at first. Just another older guy in the corner sipping lukewarm coffee. But the moment Jordan saw me, he stiffened. "What are you doing here?" he muttered when he walked past me during the break. "Community engagement," I said with a shrug. "This isn't a game." Never said it was. He took a deep breath like he was trying not to explode. "People are angry. They think this new landlord is a corporate bully." "Well," I said, "he's certainly consistent." He leaned in close, voice tight. "You want me to look bad? Is that it? Some sick lesson?" I stared at him. "No, son. I want you to look around." The meeting turned heated quickly. Cassandra, bless her boldness, stood up and read off a list of addresses that had reported steep increases. Half the room raised their hands. "Some of us have lived here for over a decade," she said. "We're not rich investors. We're families, retirees, professionals. This isn't fair." "Did anyone actually speak to the new owner?" someone asked. "Can't," another replied. "It's all emails and third-party management companies. No phone number, no face." That's when Jordan stood up. "I know some of you are frustrated," he began. "And trust me, I am too. I've been trying to get answers. But I think we need to remember this is a market shift, not a personal attack." The room murmured. A few people nodded. A few rolled their eyes. "So what? You're just okay with it?" Cassandra asked. "I'm saying we need to be rational," Jordan replied, calm but condescending. "Panic doesn't help anyone." I watched it all play out like a man who'd lit the match and walked away from the fire. But not out of cruelty. Out of necessity. Out of years of being ignored. When the meeting ended, I walked out quietly. Jordan didn't follow, but Leah did. She caught up to me outside in the parking lot, wearing a tight frown and crossed arms. "Was this your plan the whole time?" she asked. I looked at her. "I'm not sure what you mean." "You know what I mean. He's unraveling, and you're sitting back like some proud general watching the troops fall." "Jordan made his bed," I said. "He just didn't think he'd ever have to lie in it." She shook her head. "He's proud. Stubborn. But you're supposed to be his father." I didn't reply right away. I just stared at the tree line across the parking lot, wondering if Marion would have said the same thing. "I am his father," I said finally. "That's why I'm doing this. He needs to be reminded where the ground is." Leah sighed, disappointed, and walked away without another word. A few days later, it happened. The confrontation. Not a quiet talk. Not a civil disagreement. A full-blown eruption. It was a Saturday morning. I was in the front yard of Unit 11 planting some new hydrangeas when Jordan stormed across the street, voice raised before he even hit the sidewalk. "You want to humiliate me? Fine. But at least have the balls to say it." Neighbors peeked through blinds. A couple paused their morning walks. I stood up, gloves in hand, and faced him. "I'm not humiliating you," I said calmly. "I'm reminding you I exist. You raised my rent, bought the entire block like some petty king, and now you're acting like this is a damn lesson?" I didn't flinch. "You called me an embarrassment." His face twisted. "I didn't mean it like that. You meant it enough to say it." He stepped closer. "You think this makes you look strong? It makes you look small. Petty. You could have just told me how you felt." I laughed once, bitter and low. "I tried that for years. Tried to be proud of you quietly, from the sidelines. You never looked back. Never asked how I was doing. Never invited me to see your life. I was good enough to build your future, but not good enough to be in it." He blinked. For a second, he looked 10 years old again, stunned, speechless, wounded. "You never needed me," I added. "But I sure as hell needed you to remember me." Silence fell. The kind that swallows a man whole. Jordan turned and walked back to his house without another word. This time, the neighbors didn't whisper. They watched. And I let them. That night, I sat alone on the porch, the hydrangeas barely visible in the moonlight. I thought about all the things I could have said better, softer, kinder, but I also thought about how it felt to finally be heard, even if it was through anger. Sometimes love doesn't show up with hugs and dinners and warm birthday cards. Sometimes it shows up in the form of hard boundaries, uncomfortable truths, and rent notices that sting. Because love, real love, doesn't always look nice. Sometimes it looks like justice, and justice has a father's face. The days after the confrontation passed like a slow bruise, darkening by degrees. I didn't see Jordan, didn't hear from him either. The silence between us settled thick over the street, humming beneath every closed curtain and nervous glance from the neighbors. But I didn't chase him. Not once. That was the difference between now and the last 30 years of my life. Back then, every argument, every silent treatment, every passive-aggressive dig, I was always the one to make peace. I showed up to every birthday, sent cards even when I got none in return, left voicemails that went unanswered, made excuses for his distance. Not anymore. Now I stayed still. And in that stillness, I noticed something remarkable. The neighborhood began to shift its gaze. Whispers turned to conversations. People who'd ignored me before started nodding when they passed. A man in a suit asked if I had a good landscaper. Cassandra waved from her porch. Even Elliot, the retired Navy guy, dropped by with a six-pack and asked if I watch college football. And Jordan? He became the ghost. He came and went with the blinds drawn tight. No more loud phone calls on the porch. No more brunches with Leah outside under their white pergola. Just silence, and a tension so thick it hung in the air like rain that wouldn't fall. A week after the confrontation, I got a visitor I hadn't expected, Angela Reyes, my late wife's goddaughter. She was the kind of woman who never let you feel entirely comfortable. Smart, sharp-tongued, and blessed with the kind of moral compass that always pointed inconveniently toward the truth. I opened the door, and before I could say a word, she walked past me into the house like she owned it. "You're making waves," she said, scanning the kitchen like it might give her answers. I tend to cause ripples when provoked. Ripples? She arched an eyebrow. Jordan's girlfriend called me. Said he's not eating. Said he barely leaves the house. I stayed quiet. She turned and looked at me, arms crossed. "You proud of this, uncle?" "I'm not ashamed." Angela sighed and sat at the table. "He humiliated you. I get it. I really do. But buying the whole block just to raise his rent? That's not parenting. That's a chess move." I poured her some coffee and sat across from her. "You ever been talked to like you didn't matter by someone you raised?" She hesitated. "No." "Then don't tell me how to feel." "I'm not telling you how to feel," she said gently. "I'm telling you what it's doing to him. He's unraveling. He thinks you hate him." I leaned back. He should be asking himself why that thought even crossed his mind. Angela studied me for a long time. Then she reached across the table and touched my hand. "You know, Marion would have told you to knock this off." That stung more than I expected. I pulled my hand back slowly. "Marion kept him soft. I didn't have that luxury. But she also kept you soft. You've been hard ever since she died." I looked away. Out the window, across the street, to the closed blinds of Jordan's house. "I'm not trying to destroy him," I said finally. "I'm trying to reintroduce him to humility." Angela stood, grabbed her coat, and walked to the door. "Just don't forget, Uncle," she said softly. "There's a fine line between humility and humiliation." Then she left. Later that week, Leah approached me while I was out watering the front shrubs. She looked tired, dark circles, lips pressed tight. "We're moving," she said without preamble. I paused, let the hose run over the hydrangeas. "I figured," I said. "You broke something in him." "No," I replied. "I revealed something." She exhaled sharply. "You know what's sad? He talks about you constantly now. Tries to understand what he did wrong. He knows he messed up. But instead of letting him make it right, you've just boxed him in." I turned off the hose and set it down gently. "He boxed me out for years." Leah stepped closer. "You raised him to be ambitious, proud, driven. Now you're punishing him for succeeding the way you taught him to. That's not what this is about." "No," she asked. "Then what is it about? Respect? Revenge? What do you really want from him?" I looked her in the eyes and said the truth, the thing I hadn't even admitted to myself until that moment. I want him to see me. Not as an obstacle. Not as an old man he's outgrown. As the reason he got where he is. Leah's face softened. For the first time, she looked like she might cry. He sees you, she said quietly. He's just never known how to say it. Then she turned and walked away. That night, I sat on the porch again, but this time I didn't watch Jordan's house. I looked at the stars. I thought about the first time he came home crying because some kid called our beat-up sedan a junk car. He was 6. I remembered kneeling down, wiping his tears, and telling him that what you drive doesn't matter, what you do does. He believed me then. He used to believe me. And somewhere along the line, he stopped. I didn't know if this war I'd started would bring him back, or just drive the final wedge. But I knew one thing for certain. Silence had its own power. And for the first time in years, mine was being felt. There's a peculiar kind of calm that comes right before everything falls apart. For me, it arrived on a bright Saturday morning, just after sunrise, when I opened the paper and sipped my coffee in silence. Across the street, Jordan's driveway was empty. Leah's car was gone too. A moving truck had been parked outside 2 days earlier, and now, the house looked like a carcass, hollowed out, stripped of warmth. No lights on. No laughter spilling through the windows. Just blinds pulled shut like eyelids after a long cry. I thought I'd feel vindicated, but all I felt was tired. Then came the HOA picnic. Halston Ridge's crown jewel of faux community spirit. Fold-out tables, catered food, inflatables for the kids, matching shirts printed for volunteers. Normally, I'd avoid that sort of thing. Too many forced smiles and watered-down lemonade. But this time I went. Not because I wanted to be part of the group. Because I needed to see it through. To stand in the space I had so completely upended and look it dead in the eye. People noticed me. Some smiled cautiously, unsure how close they could get to the man who now owned most of their leases. Others avoided eye contact entirely. A few, like Cassandra and Elliot, greeted me warmly. Elliot handed me a burger without asking. "Looks like you stirred up the pot real good," he said with a grin. "Glad someone did." I nodded. Sometimes it needs stirring. Jordan arrived later than most, alone. No Leah. No familiar ease in his walk. He looked thinner, more drawn in the face, like the last few weeks had carved deeper lines into him. But he was dressed sharp, always was. That was his armor. People turned when he walked up. There was tension in the air, the kind that hums just beneath the sound of laughter and plastic plates clattering together. I watched him scan the crowd. He didn't look at me right away, until he did. And when our eyes met, I knew it was time. He made his way over, weaving between tables, jaw tight, movement stiff. "You really couldn't help yourself, huh?" he said as he stopped in front of me. I stayed seated. "I came for the food." He scoffed. "You came to twist the knife." Voices hushed nearby. People turned just slightly, pretending not to watch. But they were. I stood slowly. "I came because I belong here. Same as you." He shook his head. "No, you don't. You bought your way in just to prove a point. And you climbed your way in just to forget where you came from." That hit. He blinked, jaw twitching. "You think this was easy for me?" he asked, voice rising. "You think I haven't spent the last month trying to figure out why you hate me so damn much?" "I don't hate you, Jordan." "Then why would you do this? Buy the whole block? Raise rents? Embarrass me in front of people who respect me?" I took a breath. Not rushed. Steady. Heavy. "Because I spent your whole life trying to give you a future. And the moment you got it, you acted like I was the past." He stared at me, chest rising and falling. "I used to think your distance was because you were busy, or that I was too different, too simple. But that day, when you said I didn't belong in your tax bracket," I shook my head. "You made it clear. You weren't just building a life. You were erasing me from it. You're twisting my words." "No," I said louder now. I'm finally hearing them clearly. The crowd around us was silent now. A few kids ran in the background, but every adult stood frozen, pretending to focus on their paper plates while hanging onto every word. "You didn't invite me to your housewarming," I said. "Didn't ask me to meet Leah's family. Didn't even bring me up unless it was a punchline. And when I said I wanted to live closer, you laughed." "I was wrong," he said, voice cracking. "Okay, I was wrong. And it took me buying your street for you to say it." He looked around, at the neighbors, the judgment, the humiliation pooling in the spaces between us. "You couldn't have just told me you felt forgotten?" he asked. Like a normal father? I leaned in slightly. You wouldn't have listened. We stood there for a long moment, years of tension condensed into a single breath. Finally, Jordan straightened, like a man deciding not to swing in a fight he knew he'd already lost. I'm moving out, he said. I know. We're done, aren't we? I didn't answer. Because we were. Not in the way families end, but in the way illusions do. He left the picnic before the food was cleared. A few people tried to talk to him. He brushed past them like a storm cloud, trying not to rain. Later that night, I sat alone again, porch light off, street quiet. Angela texted me. Angela, I heard. Was it worth it? I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Me? Yes. Because it was. Not because I wanted him broken, but because he finally saw me. Not as the old man who used to change his oil, or the embarrassing dad in flannel, but as someone who still held power, still had pride, still mattered. It wasn't revenge. It was recognition. And sometimes, that's all a father really wants. It was quiet again. Not the kind of quiet that creeps in when things are unfinished, but the kind that settles when the final nail is in. Jordan moved out the following week. No fanfare. No long goodbye. Just a U-Haul, a tight handshake with the HOA president, and a short wave to Elliot, who barely lifted his newspaper in return. He didn't knock on my door. I didn't expect him to. He left behind a manicured lawn, a clean driveway, and the faint scent of a life he thought would be untouched. But the house itself, the shell of what was supposed to be his pride, stood emptier than before. I didn't celebrate. I didn't throw a party or take victory laps through the neighborhood. Instead, I spent that weekend tending to the garden in front of Unit 11. Hydrangeas were in bloom now, bright and full. I added new mulch, trimmed the hedges, and replaced the cracked stepping stone I'd been meaning to get to. Work like that clears the mind, gives the hands something to do when the heart's still sorting itself out. That Sunday, Angela came by again. No lecture this time. Just a brown paper bag of groceries and a six-pack of that fancy root beer I like. Street feels different, she said as we sat on the porch. It is. You ever think it'd end up like this? I thought about it. Not exactly, but I can't say I'm surprised. She looked across the street at the now empty house. He still hasn't called. I shook my head. He won't. Not for a while. Angela nodded, then leaned back in the chair beside me. You miss him? I paused. Let the truth rise slowly. I miss who he used to be. Before the suits. Before the condescension. I miss the kid who thought I could fix anything with a wrench and a few curse words. She smiled faintly. That kid's still in there. Just buried under a lot of ego. Aren't we all? We sat in silence for a while. The kind you don't need to fill. Then she stood, patted my shoulder, and said, You did what you thought was right. Doesn't mean it didn't hurt. She left after that. And she was right. It did hurt. Even in winning, I'd lost something. Or maybe I'd just made peace with what had already been lost. The next week, I lowered rent for 3 tenants on the block. Not drastically, just enough to ease the edge. I told the property manager to offer longer leases to families who'd lived there the longest. Stability. That's what people want. Not control. Not chaos. Just to know their feet are on solid ground. I didn't do it for Jordan. I did it because power without grace turns a man bitter. And I'd tasted enough bitterness to know I didn't want to drink it daily. I walked the street every morning. People waved now. Not out of fear, out of familiarity. The old man across the road wasn't just the mystery landlord anymore. I was present, visible, rooted. One afternoon, Cassandra stopped by with her 2 kids. Her oldest handed me a drawing of the flowers in my yard. Crayon on printer paper. A gift. No strings. We're glad you stayed, she said. So am I. I never sold the house Jordan lived in. Could have flipped it for a profit, easily. But I left it empty for now. Not out of hope, out of memory. It's strange, the way a place holds onto echoes. If I closed my eyes, I could still hear him coming down the driveway, phone to his ear, barking into Bluetooth like the world depended on his opinion. But now that house was quiet too. Like the space between us. Angela was right. There's a fine line between humility and humiliation. I walked it. Carefully. And maybe I stepped too far some days. But I never pushed him off the cliff. I just made him look down. I don't regret that. Because every man needs to learn where the ground is, especially when he's too high up to feel it. A few months later, I got a card in the mail. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in that clipped, almost military scrawl Jordan inherited from Marianne. Inside was a single line. I see you now. Jay. I sat with that for a long while. Didn't cry. Didn't smile. Just let it settle. He wasn't ready to come back. And I wasn't ready to invite him. But maybe, just maybe, we weren't done. Not completely. That was enough. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever had to set a boundary with someone you love, even when it hurt, drop a comment below. Do you think the father went too far? Or was he finally seen for the man he always was? Your story matters too. Share it. Let's talk about what we owe our parents and what we deserve in return.